The boy's voice cut through the noise like a fragile thread. "Can I hug you?" People nearby froze, unsure if they had heard right. The millionaire stood bent forward on a busy sidewalk, hands covering his face, shoulders trembling despite the tailored coat clinging to his frame. Tears slid through his fingers, dropping onto polished shoes that had walked through boardrooms and private halls of power. No one had dared to speak to him until the homeless boy stepped closer, thin arms wrapped in a torn jacket, eyes steady despite the cold. The city rushed around them, but time slowed, heavy with discomfort and judgment. The man's name was Victor Hale, a figure known to many, but understood by none. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with silver threaded through his dark hair, and a face shaped by years of control. He owned towers of glass and steel, companies that moved markets, and homes filled with art he never touched. Yet here he was, unraveling in public, ignored by passers-by, who pretended not to see him. His breath came uneven, chest tight, grief pressing down like weight he could no longer carry. The boy stood patiently, hands clasped, waiting for an answer. Victor had not always been this way. There was a time when his hands had been rough, his back sore from honest work, and his dreams small but warm. He grew up in a narrow apartment where heat failed often and laughter echoed louder than fear. His father worked long hours and came home tired but present, smelling of oil and metal. His mother sang softly while folding laundry, reminding him that worth was not measured by size or shine. Those memories felt distant now, like photos left too long in the sun. Everything changed when Victor was young and the accident happened. A single night of rain, twisted metal, and sirens took his parents from him. The world went quiet after that. Not the peaceful kind, but the hollow kind that rings in the ears. He learned to survive by hardening himself, by chasing success with a hunger that never rested. Each achievement built a wall between him and the pain, or so he believed. He promised himself he would never be helpless again. Years passed, and Victor became known for his sharp mind and sharper deals. He trusted numbers more than people, and contracts more than promises. Relationships came and went, shallow and brief, never allowed to dig too deep. He told himself this was strength. He told himself feelings were a weakness he could not afford. The world praised him for it, and praise became the only warmth he allowed himself to feel. But grief does not disappear when ignored. It waits. It settles into the body, into the bones, into the quiet moments between victories. On the day Victor broke down, he had just left a hospital where a doctor's voice echoed in his mind. The illness had been there longer than anyone knew. Time, once his most obedient servant, had turned against him. He walked out into the street, the weight finally unbearable, and the tears came without permission. People saw the suit, the watch, the car parked nearby. They saw wealth, not pain. Some slowed to stare, others looked away, uneasy with a powerful man showing weakness. No one stepped forward. Silence wrapped around him, thick and judgmental. That was when the boy appeared, carrying everything he owned in a worn backpack and wearing shoes held together by hope more than fabric. The boy's name was Eli. He had lived on the streets longer than he could remember, drifting between shelters, corners, and kindness that came and went. His face was smudged with dirt, his hair uneven from self-made cuts, but his eyes held something rare. They held calm. Eli had learned early that anger drained energy he could not spare. He learned to observe, to listen, to feel when someone was hurting even if they tried to hide it. Eli had lost his mother to illness and his father to despair. The system moved him from place to place until he stopped expecting permanence. Hunger became familiar. Cold became routine. What never left him was the memory of his mother's arms around him when he cried. She had told him once that a hug could remind a broken heart it was still alive. That lesson stayed, even when everything else was taken. When Eli saw Victor crying, he did not see a millionaire. He saw a man drowning quietly. He stepped forward without fear, guided by instinct rather than thought. "Can I hug you?" was not a request born of pity. It was an offer of shared humanity. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some shaking their heads, others whispering warnings. A boy like that should not touch a man like this. Rules without compassion stood tall in their minds. Victor slowly lowered his hands. His eyes were red, skin tight with emotion. He looked at the boy and saw dirt, thin limbs, and worn clothes. Then he saw something else. He saw courage. He saw the absence of judgment. For the first time that day, his breath slowed. He nodded once, unsure why, unsure of anything except the ache in his chest. Eli stepped closer and wrapped his arms around Victor's middle. The boy was small, but the gesture was full. Victor hesitated, then bent down and returned the embrace. His expensive coat brushed against the boy's rough jacket. Warmth passed between them, simple and grounding. Victor's shoulders shook again, but this time the tears felt different. They felt seen. The street grew quiet in a way that could not be ignored. People stopped walking. Phones lowered. Faces softened. No one spoke. The hug lasted only seconds, but it cracked something open in Victor that years of success had sealed shut. Eli pulled back gently and smiled, as if nothing unusual had happened. He had given what he could. That was enough. What followed was not loud or dramatic. It was a shift, subtle but powerful. Victor reached into his pocket, then stopped himself. He understood in that moment that money was not what the boy had offered, and it was not what was needed. He placed a hand on Eli's shoulder instead, grounding himself in the present. Strength does not always come from control, he thought. Sometimes it comes from surrender. Security guards who had been approaching slowed and stopped. Bystanders felt something they could not name. A woman wiped her eyes. A man straightened his posture. The city, for a brief moment, remembered how to breathe. Eli stepped back, already preparing to leave, his role complete in his own mind. Victor watched the boy turn away, backpack swaying. Something inside him refused to let the moment end there. He called after Eli, his voice steady now, carrying a weight it had never known before. He did not offer promises. He asked a simple question about where the boy slept, about what he needed tonight. Eli answered honestly, without hope or expectation. The power shift did not come from a speech or a show of wealth. It came from action rooted in respect. Victor listened. He walked beside the boy, ignoring stares, matching his pace. He made calls not to demand, but to request. Doors opened that had once stayed shut to people like Eli, not because of fear or pressure, because something had changed in Victor's voice. By the time night fell, Eli had a warm place to sleep, clean clothes, and a meal that filled him with quiet disbelief. Victor did not announce his help. He did not call the press. He sat nearby, silent, watching the boy eat, feeling a peace he had chased for decades without success. The hug had done what money never could. It had reminded him who he was before loss hardened him. In the weeks that followed, Victor's life shifted course. He invested in shelters, education programs, and support systems designed with dignity, not charity. He showed up without cameras, listened without judgment, and learned names instead of numbers. Eli returned to school, his eyes brighter, his posture taller. He still hugged when someone needed it. That part of him never changed. There are moments that rewrite a life without warning. This was one of them. A homeless boy offered comfort to a crying millionaire, and in doing so, taught him a truth the world often forgets. Worth is not counted, it is felt. And sometimes, the smallest arms can hold the greatest pain. If this story touched you, share where you are watching from and what it made you feel. Subscribe for more stories that honor quiet courage, unseen kindness, and the power of simple human connection.